Agentic AI in software development. It's probably the biggest shift in our field since high-level languages appeared in like the 1950s. As a software developer, you can't ignore this change, I'm afraid, and everyone has got AI tools these days. The big problem, as I see it, is how on earth do you learn to do good software engineering with agentic AI? Is prompt engineering even actually a proper skill that you can teach and learn? Let's talk about how you gain expertise in the new landscape of AI tooling for software development. Hi, I'm Emily Bache. I'm a software developer. I created Samman Coaching, and I want to welcome you to the Modern Software Engineering channel. We are several presenters here, all with a common goal of bringing you the latest good advice in software development. And if you enjoy this video today, please hit like and do subscribe if you'd like to get more like this. Artificial intelligence tooling and skills then. If you look, there are loads of courses about how you can integrate AI into your product so you can get machine learning enabled features. That's not really what I'm talking about though. I'm much more interested in how you learn to use AI tools to develop software in general. I mean, of course, there are also plenty of courses about how to make an MCP server or how to implement RAG or add hooks to Claude Code. That's a bit more like it. These are valuable skills for developers, but still not quite what I'm talking about. Courses on how to use AI tend to focus on specific techniques, and I'm looking for generalizable skills. Now, developers in all kinds of organizations are being given these tools and told to just try them out, experiment, learn how to use them, figure out how to use these in your production code. Trial and error and personal experience are, of course, valuable teachers, but there must be a better way to get a leg up from someone who's already done that. I said earlier that the shift to AI tools is probably as big as the shift from assembler to high-level languages. And when that happened, I don't think the best approach was just to give everyone a Fortran compiler and tell them to work out the rest by themselves. Actually, I wasn't around when that shift happened. I'm not quite that old. But I did see another shift, the early days of object-oriented design, when C++ and Java became mainstream. There were lots of experts going around offering training and coaching at the time, and there were books and courses. But in some places, people didn't get any of that. They just switched the compiler from C to C++ and carried on writing code exactly the same way as before. I saw a lot of truly terrible OO code about this time. And actually, it wasn't only C++. It turns out you can write Fortran in any language, and people wrote a lot of Java that way too. So I'm convinced with this kind of paradigm shift, you'll get much better results if developers get training in AI tools from experts, which is one of the problems. How do you find experts in a technology that is this new? Although large language models have of course been around for several years now, and coding assistants have been in your IDE for nearly as long, it's less than a year since developers started getting access to agentic AI. And this is qualitatively different from what we had before, and I think training will be particularly valuable. So agentic AI then, this is a tool that you can ask to take on a whole task. It works in a loop with access to other tools, able to run tests, research topics, try things out and update code across your repository. You can also have multiple agents working on different aspects of a task. It's actually quite different from just having a sidebar in your IDE where you can ask questions, or AI-generated line completion in your editor. Agentic AI is a much bigger shift in the way developers work minute by minute. I started looking seriously at these tools about 6 months ago with a view to start teaching them in my coaching work. I wanted to learn the state-of-the-art of prompt engineering, vibe coding, AI-assisted engineering, all of that. I think I'm starting to get somewhere. But first, let me pause and thank our sponsors, Equal Experts, Transfic, Octopus Deploy. We are grateful for their support so we can keep making these videos, and I do encourage you to find out more by following their links in the notes. All of these companies provide products and services that are well aligned with the kinds of topics we talk about on this channel. As a technical coach, I've spent many years teaching skills like test-driven development, clean code, refactoring, and my focus has always been on improving the minute-by-minute processes and habits while coding. And Agentic AI changes how that happens, although I think in essence, the mindset is the same. Dave Farley has identified the two main concerns in modern software engineering, which are optimizing for learning and managing complexity. And when you're working with Agentic AI, you are continually learning about the problem you're trying to solve, working in small steps, looking for feedback about whether you're on the right track, just like in test-driven development. And at the same time, you're managing complexity, deciding how to approach the problem, how to partition the code and separate concerns. There's an added dimension of also managing the context that you give each of your AI agents, that is, dividing up the problem. And it's still very like in test-driven development. My focus then is still on teaching the TDD mindset, this engineering process. And the way I've been doing that for years now is through the SAMAN method for technical coaching. We tend to use code katas, small, fun coding exercises, as well as pair and ensemble programming in real production code. Code katas, unfortunately, turn out to be a pretty terrible teaching aid for Agentic AI. These problems are a great size for a human brain trying to learn new ways of working, but they are just a bit too small to present any kind of challenge to an AI assistant. You can still use code katas to learn the mindset, but you have to turn off your AI tools first. If you instead try and teach these skills with a larger task, this particular problem doesn't really go away. Self-contained training problems like write an online to-do list or create a microblogging social media app, these sound like they might be a better sized challenge for an AI tool, but unfortunately not. Jodie Burchell describes data leakage as a big problem in cases like this. She explains that when you give an LLM a task that someone else has already published a solution to, that LLM will very easily be able to reproduce something very similar, because that published solution and many others like it are in the training data. There are a huge number of to-do list applications and similar, all published on GitHub. So basically any piece of software which has previously been used as a teaching example will be in the training data. And it's difficult to learn how to use a tool on an exercise if it's going to behave completely differently in your closed source novel production code. Basically, I don't think it's possible to train these skills for Agentic AI on made-up code examples. Which is a problem because that's a major part of how we usually teach new tools and techniques. So how can I prepare training materials without small coding exercises? Well, what about patterns? Design patterns, patterns in general. This is quite an old idea in software, that by studying existing solutions, you can start to spot repeated elements and understand some of the forces to look for that would lead you to not the actual specific solution, but a kind of pattern that you can base your solution on. If prompt engineering were a skill that you could learn, you'd expect that there would be patterns in the kinds of prompts that would work in particular kinds of situations. And this is something that you could describe on made-up examples. People can study those and then learn to apply the same patterns in production code. This seems like a reasonable approach, and I was reading the book Beyond Vibe Coding by Adi Osmani. It's had good reviews. It's got a section about patterns for prompt engineering even. Now, this book came out less than 6 months ago, and I was just having a read through the patterns. And for basically all of them, my reaction was, that's unnecessary, that's obvious, that's superseded. I think this was probably good advice when the book came out, but the tools have just moved on loads since then. Just an example, one of the patterns in Adi Osmani's book was contextual prompting. So just say you want to write some code and use a particular API. He advises you that you could include a snippet from the API's documentation in your prompt, and then the tool would be more likely to use it correctly in the code it generates. It sounds like a good plan, but These days, the AI agent is more than capable of looking up the documentation for an API without you needing to do anything. Happily, I've found some newer patterns that work much better with the current generation of agentic AI tools, and I'm particularly impressed with augmented coding patterns compiled by Lada Kessler, Yvette Erderg, and several others. These patterns are nicely described in a talk and a website, which I recommend, and I found a lot of value using them. That example that I just shared, Osmani's contextual prompting, Lada pointed out to me when I discussed it with her. It's kind of basically a specific case of one of her patterns, reference docs. Do check it out on the website. Basically, I'm finding these augmented coding patterns are well explained. They address fundamental limitations of large language models as they are now, and they're based on a lot of actual experience using agentic AI. I do want to stress again just how fast these AI tools are changing. The very newest models seem to be doing some of these patterns without you needing to prompt it even. One of the patterns is check alignment. It says basically, when you give the agent a new task, remind it to ask you questions and explain the plan before starting. This alignment check can stop that agent from going off in the wrong direction and discover whether you're aligned in your ideas much sooner. Thing is, the last time I was using one of these tools, I didn't actually need to tell it to do this. I gave it a new task and I forgot to ask it to do this. And it spontaneously checked alignment with me anyway. It might not always do that. The tools are changing very rapidly though, and it is quite difficult to keep up sometimes. I'm still convinced that the core skills in software engineering are optimize for learning, manage complexity. Those fundamentals from Dave Farley's book, Modern Software Engineering, they don't change when our tools do. When I'm using agentic AI, it's still me doing the engineering. I think, though, prompt engineering actually is a skill within software engineering. That's the part of the wider tactics that you use to get the agentic AI to work in small steps and so you can stay in control of the complexity. Probably augmented coding is a better name for it, though. A mindset of test-driven development is still my best advice for an effective process, but the details of how to do it do change when you've got agentic AI. Patterns for augmented coding are the most valuable specific AI skills I advise you to learn right now, and actually I'm working closely with collaborators like Lada Kessler, Yvette Erderg, Llewellyn Falco and others in the Saman Society to try and bring these engineering patterns into Saman coaching and better teach how to use agentic AI. So if you haven't done so already, do subscribe to the Saman newsletter and this channel so you can keep up to date with what we're doing. Let me conclude with my best advice for developers who are trying to learn AI tooling today. Trial and error in real production code is quite a slow way to learn, but experts and trainers are in a difficult position. When it comes to these specific AI skills, it's quite difficult to find good exercises for that. Although you can use code katas, of course, to learn the TDD mindset in the traditional manner. I recommend you find an expert in engineering, modern software engineering, and prefer to get technical coaching in your production code rather than just training courses. In particular, I encourage you to learn about and experiment with the latest augmented coding patterns. Happy coding!